The orbital command station Athena hung in geosynchronous orbit, above Earth like a gleaming sentinel, its massive solar arrays catching the light of the distant sun. Inside the station's central command hub, Admiral Lena Ortiz stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her gaze fixed on the holographic display that dominated the center of the room. The three-dimensional projection showed the current deployment of Earth's defense fleet, scattered across the solar system in a strategic pattern that had been revised a dozen times in the past week. 1 week. That was all it had taken for humanity to go from peaceful solar system exploration to war. "Admiral," a voice called from behind her. "The Terran Defense Council is assembled and waiting." Ortiz nodded without turning. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll be there momentarily." The lieutenant hesitated. "They're asking about the casualty reports from the Ganymede skirmish." Now Ortiz did turn, her dark eyes betraying a flash of pain before her military discipline reasserted itself. "Then they'll have them, every name, every rank, including Commander Marcus Ortiz, her younger brother." The thought came unbidden, a sharp pain that she pushed aside. There would be time for grief later. Right now, Earth needed her focused. The Terran Defense Council chamber was a semicircular room with tiered seating, designed to accommodate the 12 representatives from Earth's unified government. They all rose as Ortiz entered, a gesture of respect that felt hollow, given what she knew was coming. "Admiral Ortiz," Council President Helena Kwan began, "we've reviewed your preliminary report on the Ganymede engagement. The casualties are concerning." "Concerning isn't the word I would use, Madam President," Ortiz replied, taking her position at the podium. 342 dead, 1,026 wounded, 2 destroyers lost, 4 frigates damaged beyond repair. The Xylarians initiated an unprovoked attack on our research outpost, and they paid a price, but not nearly enough. Ambassador Selena Wu leaned forward, her elegant features set in a diplomatic mask that Ortiz had come to recognize and dread. "Admiral, some members of the Council believe we should pursue diplomatic channels before committing to further military action. The Xylarian Empire has existed for centuries without direct conflict with Earth. This could be a misunderstanding." "With respect, Ambassador," Ortiz cut in. "The Xylarians decloaked and opened fire without warning or provocation. Their energy weapons specifically targeted our life support systems. That's not a misunderstanding. It's a calculated attempt to test our defenses and resolve." Defense Minister Okonkwo, a tall man with a deep voice that carried authority, nodded in agreement. "I've reviewed the tactical data. This was a probing attack, designed to assess our military capabilities." "Exactly," Ortiz said, bringing up her own holographic display. "And based on intercepted communications, we believe the Xylarians were disappointed by the results. They expected us to break and run. Instead, our forces regrouped and fought back, inflicting significant damage on their lead dreadnought before they retreated." "And you believe they'll return?" President Kwan stated. "I know they will," Ortiz replied. "The question is when and where." The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The emergency klaxons began wailing just as the council session was adjourning. Ortiz was already running for the command center when the report came through her neural interface. "Xylarian dreadnought, Luna orbit, they've just decloaked and are targeting the civilian transport convoy." Ortiz burst into the command center, barking orders even as she processed the tactical display. "All available ships to defensive positions, civilian evacuation protocols for Luna base, and get me a direct feed." The main view screen flickered to life, showing a massive Xylarian warship, its distinctive organic metallic hull gleaming with an oily iridescence against the stark backdrop of Luna's surface. Even as they watched, brilliant energy beams lanced out from the dreadnought, cutting through 3 civilian transports in quick succession, thousands of lives extinguished in seconds. "They're sending a message," Ortiz said quietly, her voice tight with controlled fury. "They're saying they can strike at the heart of our territory anytime they choose." Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, her tactical officer, looked up from her console. "Orders, Admiral." Ortiz's eyes never left the screen. "Assemble Task Force Vanguard. I want our experimental stealth frigates scrambled immediately under Captain Haru Tanaka. Tell Lunar Defense Command to deploy interceptors, but they are not to engage directly. Just buy time for the evacuation ships." "And the Resolute?" Rodriguez asked, referring to Earth's flagship. "Prepare her for immediate departure," Ortiz said. "I'll be commanding this operation personally." As the command center erupted into disciplined activity, Ortiz took a moment to access her private communications channel. The face of Captain Rajiv Wong appeared, his normally calm expression tense. "Rajiv, I need your Black Horizon squadron ready for a special reconnaissance mission. The Xylarians just hit us at Luna. This isn't random. They're establishing a pattern. I need to know where they're operating from." Wong nodded sharply. "We're prepped and ready, Admiral. The stealth systems on the new Spectre-class frigates are untested in combat conditions, but the simulations are promising." "Good. I'm uploading coordinates now. I want you to take your squadron into Mars orbit, the far side, where our sensor coverage is weaker. If they have a forward operating base, that's where it would be." "Understood. And if we find something?" "Observe only. Do not engage unless directly threatened. We need intelligence more than we need heroics." Wong's face hardened. "I heard about Marcus. I'm sorry. Lena." For just a moment, Ortiz's professional mask slipped. He was on the research vessel Galileo. Xylarian boarding parties executed the entire science team after downloading their research data. This isn't just about territory or resources. Rajiv, they're studying us, learning how we fight, how we think. Then we'll have to show them that humanity doesn't follow predictable patterns." Wong replied grimly. "Exactly. Now go. I want your preliminary report in 6 hours." As Wong's image disappeared, Ortiz turned back to the tactical display. The Xylarian dreadnought had already cloaked again, vanishing from conventional sensors, but leaving devastation in its wake. The wreckage of the civilian transports drifted lifelessly in Luna's orbit, a grim testament to the enemy's callousness. "Admiral," a voice called from across the command center, "the Council is demanding an immediate briefing." "Tell them I'm on my way," Ortiz replied, straightening her uniform. "And have Dr. Amina Solis meet me there. If we're going to fight the Xylarians effectively, we're going to need her waveform disruptor technology." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of preparations, briefings, and arguments. The Council was divided between those who recognized the existential threat the Xylarians posed and those who still clung to the hope of diplomatic resolution. Ortiz had no time for the latter group, but was forced to acknowledge their concerns. "Ambassador Wu," she said, during a particularly heated exchange, "I understand your commitment to peaceful resolution, but the Xylarians have shown no interest in communication. They've made no attempts to hail us, no efforts to explain their actions. They attack, they withdraw, they study our responses. This is not the behavior of a civilization seeking dialogue." Wu's expression remained serene, but her voice carried an edge. "And yet, Admiral, if we respond only with force, we confirm whatever preconceptions they may have about humanity being primitive and aggressive." "I'm not advocating for blind aggression," Ortiz countered. "I'm advocating for a position of strength. You can't negotiate effectively from your knees." Before Wu could respond, Ortiz's neural interface pinged with an urgent message from Wong. She held up a hand. "Excuse me. This is the reconnaissance report I've been waiting for." The Council members fell silent as Ortiz received the data packet. Her expression grew increasingly grim as she processed the information. "Captain Wong's stealth squadron has located a Xylarian forward base in Mars orbit," she announced. It appears they've established an artificial habitat using technology similar to our own terraforming equipment, but far more advanced. Thermal and radiation signatures suggest they're operating some form of large-scale planetary weapon. Defense Minister Okonkwo leaned forward. A weapon targeting Mars? No, Ortiz replied. Based on its orientation and power readings, it's aimed at Earth. A stunned silence fell over the council chamber. How much time do we have? President Kwan asked finally. Unknown. But Captain Wong reports significant activity. They're building up power in stages. My analysis suggests they're still calibrating the weapon system. We may have days, or we may have hours. Options? Okonkwo prompted. Ortiz straightened. A direct assault on their base, using the intelligence Captain Wong has gathered. We'll need to deploy the experimental waveform disruptors to penetrate their shields. She turned to Dr. Amina Solis, who had been quietly observing from a corner of the room. Doctor, is your technology ready for field deployment? Solis, a compact woman with intense eyes and close-cropped hair, stepped forward. The prototypes have performed as expected in laboratory conditions, but we haven't had time for extensive field testing. The theory is sound. The disruptors identify the frequency modulation of Xylarian shield systems and generate a counterwave that creates localized disruptions, allowing conventional weapons to penetrate. But will they work? Ortiz pressed. Solis met her gaze unflinchingly. I believe so. But there are variables we can't account for until we see them in action. Ambassador Wu rose from her seat. This is precisely why we should attempt communication before committing to an attack. If their weapon is still being calibrated, we have time for diplomatic. With respect, Ambassador, Ortiz interrupted, we've just received intelligence that the enemy is preparing a weapon capable of striking Earth from Mars orbit. I don't see this as a time for extending diplomatic overtures. President Kwan held up a hand for silence. Admiral Ortiz, how quickly can you mount an operation? Task Force Vanguard can be ready to depart within 12 hours. I've already ordered preliminary preparations. Kwan exchanged glances with the other council members, then nodded decisively. You have authorization to proceed, Admiral. But I want it clearly understood that your primary objective is to neutralize the threat. If an opportunity for communication presents itself, you will take it. Understood, Madam President. Ortiz turned to leave, then paused. Dr. Solis, I'd like you to accompany the task force. Your expertise may be needed if the disruptors require adjustment. Solis nodded. I'll gather my team and equipment. As they left the council chamber, Ortiz activated her neural interface. Captain Wong, this is Admiral Ortiz. Maintain your position and continue surveillance. Task Force Vanguard will rendezvous with you at the following coordinates in approximately 14 hours. Do not, under any circumstances, engage the enemy before we arrive. Understood, Admiral, Wong replied. Though you should know, we're detecting Xylarian patrol ships beginning systematic sweeps of the area. Our stealth systems are holding for now, but if they adjust their sensor frequencies... Acknowledged. If detection becomes imminent, withdraw to safety. The intelligence you've gathered is too valuable to lose. Aye, Admiral, Wong out. Ortiz turned to Solis as they strode toward the docking bay. Doctor, I need your honest assessment. Not what you told the council, but what you really believe. Will these disruptors work against Xylarian shields? Solis was quiet for a moment. The physics is sound. We've studied the shield frequencies from the Ganymede engagement extensively, but the Xylarians are adaptive. They may have already modified their systems. Then we'll need to be adaptive too, Ortiz said grimly. How many disruptor units do we have? 57 prototype drones, each equipped with a single disruptor. Once activated, they have approximately 3 minutes of operational time before their power cells are depleted. 3 minutes, Ortiz mused. Not much time to make an impression. It should be enough to create several localized breaches in their shield network, Solis replied. Your weapons officers will need to coordinate their fire precisely with the disruption patterns. I'll make sure they understand. Ortiz's pace quickened as they approached the shuttle bay. We depart in 2 hours. Get whatever you need and meet me aboard the Resolute. The next 12 hours were a flurry of preparations as Task Force Vanguard assembled in Earth orbit. The fleet consisted of the flagship Resolute, 4 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and a complement of support vessels. The experimental stealth frigates under Captain Wong would serve as their eyes and ears, while Dr. Solis's disruptor drones would be their key to penetrating the formidable Xylarian defenses. Aboard the Resolute, Ortiz conducted a final briefing with her command staff. The Xylarian forward base is situated in Mars's orbit, using the planet's magnetic field to help mask its energy signature, she explained, gesturing to the holographic display. Captain Wong's reconnaissance has identified 3 main structures: a central command hub, a power generation facility, and what appears to be the weapon platform itself. Our primary target is the weapon. Secondary targets are their power systems and command infrastructure. Captain Eliza Kowalski, commander of the cruiser Thunderchild, raised a hand. What about Xylarian ships in the area? Intelligence indicates at least 1 Dreadnought-class vessel, similar to the one that attacked the Luna convoy, plus support ships. Ortiz replied. Captain Wong reports they maintain regular patrol patterns, but most of their fleet seems to be elsewhere. This may be our best opportunity to strike before they can bring reinforcements. And the disruptors? Asked Commander Jackson, the Resolute's weapons officer. Ortiz nodded to Dr. Solis, who stepped forward. The disruptor drones will be deployed in 3 waves, Solis explained. Each drone autonomously identifies shield harmonics and generates a counter-frequency. The disruption creates a localized hole in their shields, approximately 50 meters in diameter. These holes will persist for roughly 20 seconds before the Xylarian systems adapt. So we'll have a very narrow window to deliver our payload, Jackson noted. Exactly, Ortiz confirmed. This is why timing and coordination are crucial. Each ship has been assigned specific targets and firing solutions. The disruptors will create the openings. You need to be ready to exploit them immediately. She surveyed the assembled officers, meeting each one's gaze. I won't sugarcoat this. We're taking an enormous risk. The Xylarians have technology that, in some areas, surpasses our own. But they've underestimated us once already. They think we're predictable, that we lack the resolve to stand against them. Today, we prove them wrong. A chorus of, "Yes, Admiral," echoed through the briefing room. One last thing, Ortiz added. If you encounter an opportunity to capture Xylarian technology or data, take it. Dr. Solis and her team have prepared specialized extraction protocols. The more we learn about our enemy, the better we can defend against them. But, her voice hardened, this is not a salvage mission. Your primary duty is to your ships and your crews. Do not take unnecessary risks. As the officers filed out to return to their respective ships, Captain Wong approached Ortiz privately. Lena, he said quietly, my squadron has detected increased activity at the Xylarian base. They may be accelerating their timeline. How long? Based on power fluctuations, I'd estimate they'll be ready to deploy their weapon in less than 10 hours. Ortiz's jaw tightened. Then we move now. Signal the fleet. We depart in 30 minutes. The journey to Mars was tense, with the fleet traveling in tight formation through the void. As they approached the red planet, the ships activated their electronic countermeasures, creating a diffuse sensor profile that would hopefully confuse Xylarian detection systems long enough for them to achieve surprise. Entering Mars orbit in 5 minutes, the Resolute's navigation officer announced, Xylarian base will be on the far side of the planet in 7 minutes. Ortiz stood on the command deck, her posture rigid. All ships, maintain communications discipline. Prepare to deploy as planned on my mark. The fleet curved around Mars's crimson surface, using the planet's bulk to shield them from direct observation. As they emerged from the planet's shadow, the Xylarian base came into view, a sprawling, otherworldly construction that seemed to pulse with internal light. Its architecture a disorienting blend of geometric precision and organic curves. Xylarian patrols detected, the sensor officer reported. 2 light cruisers, approaching from bearing 045. Have they spotted us? Ortiz demanded. Unclear. Their course hasn't changed, but they've increased power to their forward sensors. Ortiz made her decision. We can't wait. All ships. Commence attack pattern Delta. Captain Wong. Deploy your squadron to neutralize those patrol cruisers. Dr. Solis. Launch the first wave of disruptors. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as officers relayed commands and monitored systems. On the main view screen, Ortiz watched as the first wave of disruptor drones, little more than metallic spheres bristling with sensor arrays, shot toward the Xylarian base. Xylarian defense systems activating, the tactical officer reported. They're launching interceptors. They've seen us, Ortiz confirmed. All ships, weapons free, cruiser group, target their power infrastructure as planned. The space around the Xylarian base lit up with weapons fire as Earth's fleet engaged. The Xylarian patrol cruisers broke off their course and accelerated toward the human ships, their own weapons charging. First wave of disruptors has reached optimal range, Dr. Solis reported, her eyes fixed on her specialized console. Initiating disruption sequence. On the tactical display, Ortiz watched as the drones began emitting complex energy patterns, searching for the frequencies that would counteract the Xylarian shields. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like soap bubbles popping, small gaps appeared in the shimmering energy field that surrounded the Xylarian base. We have disruption, Solis announced. Multiple breaches detected in their shield network. Weapons. Fire all batteries through designated breach points, Ortiz ordered. Cruisers, commence your attack runs. The Resolute shuddered as its main guns discharged, sending hypersonic projectiles and energy beams toward the now vulnerable sections of the Xylarian base. Across the battlefield, Earth's cruisers and destroyers did the same, concentrating their fire on the gaps created by the disruptor drones. Direct hits confirmed, the tactical officer reported. Xylarian power fluctuations detected. Their secondary shield generators are attempting to compensate. Launch the second wave of disruptors, Ortiz commanded. Target their adaptive nodes specifically. Even as the battle unfolded around the main base, Captain Wong's stealth frigates engaged the Xylarian patrol cruisers. The Earth vessels, smaller but more maneuverable, darted around their larger opponents, striking from unexpected vectors and withdrawing before the Xylarians could bring their main weapons to bear. Captain Wong reports partial success. Communications relayed. One Xylarian cruiser has sustained significant damage to its propulsion systems. The second is attempting to call for reinforcements. Jam their communications, Ortiz ordered. We need to keep this contained. The battle intensified as the Xylarians recovered from their initial surprise. Energy weapons lashed out from the base, catching one of Earth's destroyers in a sustained beam that cut through its armor like paper. The ship's emergency transponder activated as its crew abandoned ship. Second wave of disruptors deployed, Solis reported. New breach points forming, now. All ships, adjust targeting solutions, Ortiz commanded. Focus fire on their weapon platform. The combined firepower of Task Force Vanguard converged on the Xylarian weapon, a massive apparatus that dominated one section of their base. The structure buckled under the assault, secondary explosions rippling across its surface. We've damaged their main weapon, the tactical officer confirmed. But it's still operational. Power readings indicate they're attempting to bring it online despite the damage. They're desperate, Ortiz realized. They're going to try to fire it at us directly. She turned to Solis. Doctor, we need the third wave now. They're not ready, Solus protested. The drones need time to recalibrate based on the Xylarian shield adaptations. We don't have time, Ortiz insisted. Launch them as they are. Solus hesitated, then nodded. Launching third wave. But Admiral, their effectiveness will be reduced. The final wave of disruptor drones shot toward the Xylarian base, even as return fire from the enemy intensified. 2 of the drones were destroyed immediately, their delicate systems unable to withstand direct hits. Xylarian weapon powering up, the sensor officer reported urgently. Energy readings spiking! Evasive maneuvers, Ortiz ordered. All ships, break formation and... Before she could finish, a blinding beam of energy erupted from the damaged Xylarian weapon platform, cutting through space toward the Earth fleet. It caught one of the cruisers, the Intrepid, along its port side, shearing away a section of its hull before the beam dissipated. Intrepid reports heavy casualties. Communications relayed. They've lost power to decks 5 through 12 and are venting atmosphere. Send medical teams and damage control units, Ortiz commanded. Remaining ships, continue the assault. We need to take out that weapon before they can fire again. The third wave of disruptors reached their targets, creating new breaches in the Xylarian shields. Though, as Solus had warned, the gaps were smaller and less stable than those created by the previous waves. It's not enough, Ortiz muttered, studying the tactical display. The Xylarian weapon was damaged but still functional, and their shields were adapting to the disruptors faster than anticipated. She made a split-second decision. Helm, bring us in closer. I want the Resolute within 5 kilometers of their main power facility. Admiral, the navigation officer questioned, clearly surprised by the order. You heard me, Lieutenant Dr. Solus. How many disruptors do we have left? 17, Admiral. But as I said, their effectiveness is diminishing with each deployment. I don't need them to be effective against the entire base, Ortiz explained. I just need one good breach directly above their power core. Can you do that? Solus's eyes widened as she grasped Ortiz's plan. It's possible, but we'd need to get much closer than 5 kilometers. The remaining drones don't have the power output for long-range disruption anymore. How close? Less than 2 kilometers. But Admiral, at that range, we'd be well within the blast radius if their power core destabilizes. Ortiz's expression was grim. I'm aware of the risks, Doctor. Helm, adjust course. 2 kilometers from the target. As the Resolute broke from the fleet formation and accelerated toward the Xylarian base, Captain Wong's voice came through on a secure channel. Lena, what are you doing? The Resolute doesn't have the maneuverability to evade at that range. I know what I'm doing, Rajiv, Ortiz replied calmly. Continue engaging those patrol cruisers. Don't let them interfere. The Resolute shuddered as it absorbed multiple hits from the base's defensive weapons. Damage reports flooded in, but Ortiz remained focused on the approaching target. 1,000 meters to optimal range, the navigation officer announced, his voice tense. Prepare all remaining disruptors for concentrated deployment, Ortiz ordered. Target coordinates locked on their main power core. Weapons, stand by with everything we've got. Admiral, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the Xylarian base. They're hailing us. Ortiz hesitated, remembering President Kwan's instructions about communication. Put it through, audio only. A harsh, modulated voice filled the bridge. Human vessel, you will cease your attack immediately. Your primitive weapons cannot prevail against Xylarian might. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. This is Admiral Lena Ortiz of the United Earth Defense Fleet, she replied, her voice steady. You attacked our outposts without provocation. You slaughtered civilians. And now you threaten our homeworld. We will not surrender. Then you will be destroyed, the Xylarian voice responded. Your species is chaotic, unpredictable. You have no place in the ordered galaxy we envision. It's our unpredictability you should fear, Ortiz retorted. Dr. Solus, deploy the disruptors, now, The remaining disruptor drones launched from the Resolute's bays, streaking toward the Xylarian base at maximum velocity. As they approached, they began emitting their counter-frequency waves, probing for weaknesses in the adaptive shields. Breach forming directly above the power core, Solus reported, excitement breaking through her professional demeanor. "It's working!" "All weapons, fire on that breach," Ortiz commanded. The Resolute unleashed its full arsenal into the small gap in the Xylarian shields. Kinetic projectiles, energy beams, and tactical missiles converged on a single point, overwhelming the already damaged infrastructure beneath. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a blinding flash erupted from the Xylarian base as its power core began to destabilize. "Chain reaction detected in their power systems," the sensor officer reported. "Massive energy fluctuations throughout the base." "All ships, retreat to minimum safe distance," Ortiz ordered. "Helm, get us out of here, maximum thrust." The Resolute's engines screamed as the massive ship pivoted and accelerated away from the doomed Xylarian base. Behind them, the alien structure began to break apart, secondary explosions rippling across its surface as its power core collapsed. 10 seconds to critical mass," Solus warned, watching her instruments. "We're still within the blast radius." "Divert all available power to rear shields," Ortiz commanded. "Brace for impact." The bridge crew secured themselves as the Resolute raced against time. Then, with a silent flash that temporarily overloaded their sensors, the Xylarian base exploded, the shockwave rushing outward at tremendous speed. It caught the Resolute from behind, lifting and tossing the massive ship as if it were a toy. Emergency systems wailed as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. On the bridge, officers were thrown from their stations despite safety restraints. Ortiz, gripping her command chair with white knuckles, watched as system after system reported damage or failure. For a terrifying moment, it seemed the Resolute might not survive. Then, gradually, the ship stabilized. Emergency power kicked in, restoring minimal lighting and life support. "Damage report," Ortiz called out, her voice hoarse. "Multiple hull breaches on decks 3 through 17, the operations officer replied. "Engines at 12% capacity. Weapons systems offline. Communication arrays damaged, but functional." "Casualties?" "Reports still coming in. Medical teams are responding, but it's bad, Admiral." Ortiz closed her eyes briefly, acknowledging the cost of her decision. "What about the rest of the fleet?" "The Thunderchild and Dauntless are reporting significant damage but are operational. The Intrepid has lost power to its main systems and is running on emergency backup. Captain Wong's squadron is intact. Their distance and stealth systems protected them from the worst of the blast." "And the Xylarians?" "The base has been completely destroyed. No sign of the weapon platform or command structure. One of their patrol cruisers was caught in the blast and destroyed. The second is damaged and withdrawing." Ortiz nodded slowly. "Open a channel to the retreating Xylarian vessel." "Channel open, Admiral." Ortiz straightened in her chair, ignoring the pain from what was likely several broken ribs. "Xylarian vessel, this is Admiral Ortiz. Your base is destroyed. Your weapon is gone. But we have spared your ship as a messenger. Return to your fleet and tell them this. Earth is not defenseless. We do not want war, but we will not tolerate aggression against our people or our worlds. Any further hostile actions will be met with the same resolve you witnessed today." There was a long pause before a response came, a different voice than before, deeper and somehow more measured. "This is Admiral Kethral of the Xylarian Imperium. You have surprised us, human. Few species have offered such resistance. I will convey your message to the Imperium. But know this: the Xylarian advance cannot be halted by a single defeat." "Then we will defeat you again," Ortiz replied simply. "And again after that, if necessary. Or you can choose another path. The choice is yours, Admiral Kethral." Another pause. Longer this time. "Perhaps There is something to be learned from your species after all. I will withdraw my forces from your system, for now. But we will meet again, Admiral Ortiz. I look forward to it, Ortiz responded, preferably across a negotiating table rather than a battlefield. As the communication ended, Ortiz turned to her bridge crew. Begin rescue and recovery operations. I want damage control teams assisting all vessels that need them. Dr. Solis, I need an assessment of the remaining disruptor technology. What worked, what didn't, and how we can improve it. Yes, Admiral, Solis replied, already working at her station despite a nasty gash on her forehead. And get me Captain Wong. I want his stealth frigates running reconnaissance to ensure the Xylarians are actually withdrawing, not regrouping. As the crew set about their tasks, Ortiz allowed herself a moment of reflection. The victory had been costly, perhaps too costly, but they had protected Earth, and in doing so, may have opened a door to something other than all-out war. Hours later, as the damaged fleet limped back toward Earth, Ortiz sat in her private quarters, reviewing casualty reports. The numbers were grim. Hundreds dead, many more wounded, ships damaged or destroyed. And yet, compared to what might have happened had the Xylarian weapon been deployed against Earth, it was a price worth paying. A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter!" she called. Captain Wong stepped inside, his uniform scorched and torn in places, his face bearing the marks of recent combat. "Admiral, the medical team says you refused treatment." Ortiz waved a hand dismissively. "Others needed it more. I'm fine." "You have 3 broken ribs and a concussion," Wong countered, setting a medical kit on her desk. "At least let me give you something for the pain." She relented, allowing him to administer a hypospray. "How are your ships?" "Operational. We lost 2, but the crews ejected safely. The stealth systems performed better than expected. The Xylarians never seemed to get a clear lock on us." "And your reconnaissance?" "The Xylarian cruiser has left the system, as promised. Long-range scans show no sign of additional Xylarian forces within detection range. For now, at least, they're honoring Admiral Kethral's word." Ortiz nodded, feeling the pain medication beginning to take effect. "You know they'll be back." "Yes," Wong agreed. "But next time, we'll be better prepared. Dr. Solis is already working on improvements to the disruptor technology based on the battle data." "Good." Ortiz leaned back in her chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the past days. "We bought ourselves some time, Rajiv. Now we need to use it wisely." "The Council has called an emergency session," Wong informed her. "They want you to brief them as soon as we return to Earth orbit." "Of course they do," Ortiz sighed. "I suppose Ambassador Wu will have plenty to say about my decision to engage rather than attempt further communication." "Actually," Wong said with a slight smile, "I hear the ambassador is now advocating for accelerated military preparations alongside diplomatic initiatives. Your demonstration of negotiating from strength seems to have made an impression." "That's unexpected." "Not really," Wong replied. "You showed that humanity can stand up to the Xylarians. That changes the diplomatic equation considerably." Ortiz nodded thoughtfully. "What about Kethral? What do we know about him?" "Intelligence is still analyzing the communications, but preliminary assessment suggests he's a senior military commander with considerable autonomy. The fact that he agreed to withdraw rather than continue fighting is significant." "He's pragmatic," Ortiz mused. "He recognized a losing position and chose to preserve his forces. That's someone we can potentially deal with." "Perhaps," Wong agreed. "But he also made it clear the Xylarians haven't abandoned their expansionist goals." "No," Ortiz conceded. "This was a battle, not the war. But we've shown them that humanity isn't an easy target. That alone changes everything." 3 days later, the damaged fleet arrived in Earth orbit to a hero's welcome. Despite the losses, the public and political mood was one of relief and pride. Earth had faced its first major interstellar threat, and had not only survived, but prevailed. The Terran Defense Council session was packed, with additional observers from various Earth governments in attendance. Ortiz, still bandaged but standing straight, delivered her report on the battle and its outcomes. "In conclusion," she finished, "we have demonstrated both our capability and our resolve to the Xylarian Imperium. Their weapon platform has been destroyed, and they have withdrawn from our system. However, this should be viewed as a temporary respite, not a permanent victory. The Xylarians will return, likely with greater numbers and adapted tactics." "What do you recommend, Admiral?" President Kwan asked. "A three-pronged approach," Ortiz replied without hesitation. "First, accelerated military development, focusing on the technologies that proved effective against Xylarian systems, particularly Dr. Solis's disruptor technology and Captain Wong's stealth systems. Second, enhanced surveillance throughout the solar system to provide early warning of any Xylarian incursion. And third," she nodded toward Ambassador Wu, "diplomatic initiatives aimed at establishing formal communication channels with the Xylarian Imperium." Wu seemed surprised by the inclusion of diplomacy in Ortiz's recommendations. "You believe negotiation is possible?" "I believe Admiral Kethral is a rational actor," Ortiz clarified. "He recognized defeat and chose to withdraw, rather than sacrifice his forces needlessly. That suggests a pragmatic mindset that might be receptive to diplomatic overtures, especially now that he understands we're not as primitive as the Xylarians initially believed." Defense Minister Okonkwo leaned forward. "And if diplomacy fails?" "Then we continue to build our defenses," Ortiz stated simply. "We expand the fleet, develop new weapons and countermeasures, and prepare for a longer conflict. But we do so from a position of demonstrated strength, not fear." The Council deliberated briefly before President Kwan delivered their decision. "Admiral Ortiz, your recommendations are approved. You will continue to command the defense fleet, with expanded authority to implement the military aspects of your proposal. Ambassador Wu will lead the diplomatic initiative, working in close coordination with you to ensure our approaches are complementary rather than contradictory." "Thank you, Madam President," Ortiz acknowledged. As the session adjourned, Wu approached Ortiz privately. "Admiral, I owe you an apology. I misjudged your intentions." "No apology necessary, Ambassador," Ortiz replied. "We share the same goal, protecting Earth. We simply had different views on how to achieve it." "Perhaps," Wu conceded. "But your approach has given us something my diplomacy could not have: respect. The Xylarians would never have taken us seriously without the demonstration of our capabilities. And they'll never agree to equitable terms without skilled diplomacy," Ortiz countered. "We need both our disciplines. Ambassador, sword and pen, as the old saying goes." Wu smiled slightly. "Indeed. I look forward to working with you more closely in the future." The weeks that followed were filled with intense activity as Earth prepared for the possibility of renewed Xylarian aggression. Military production accelerated, with particular emphasis on the technologies that had proven effective in the recent battle. Dr. Solis's laboratory was expanded, with additional resources allocated to refining and mass-producing the waveform disruptor technology. Captain Wong was promoted to Rear Admiral and given command of a new stealth fleet, tasked with long-range reconnaissance and early warning. And through diplomatic channels, Ambassador Wu began careful outreach to the Xylarian Imperium, offering to establish formal communication protocols and, eventually, perhaps, face-to-face meetings. 1 month after the Battle of Mars orbit, Admiral Ortiz stood in a small memorial garden aboard Station Athena. The garden had been created to honor those lost in the conflict with the Xylarians, with a central monument listing every name. Her eyes found the one she sought: Commander Marcus Ortiz, Galileo research vessel. "I hope we made you proud, little brother," she murmured, touching the engraved name gently. "Admiral," a voice called softly from behind her. She turned to see Captain Wong approaching. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've received a response from the Xylarians. Admiral Kethral has agreed to a direct communication session." Ortiz's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's sooner than expected. Ambassador Wu must be pleased." "She is," Wong confirmed. "But there's more. Kethral has specifically requested that you participate in the discussion." "Me? Why?" "He says he wishes to continue the dialogue with the human commander, who understands both strength and restraint. His words, not mine." Ortiz glanced back at the memorial, then nodded decisively. "Tell Ambassador Wu I'll be there. And Rajiv, make sure our long-range sensors remain at full alert during this dialogue. I haven't forgotten that Xylarians use cloaking technology." "Already done," Wong assured her. "Trust, but verify." "Exactly." Ortiz took one last look at her brother's name, then straightened her uniform. "Let's go see what Admiral Kethral has to say. Perhaps this is the beginning of something better than war." "And if not?" Wong asked quietly. Ortiz's expression hardened. "Then we'll remind them why Earth is not a world to be trifled with. They wanted a fight. We gave them the kind you regret asking for, and we can do it again if necessary." Together, they walked toward the diplomatic section of Athena Station, where Earth's future relationship with the Xylarian Imperium would begin to take shape, forged in the crucible of battle, but with the potential for something beyond mere conflict. It was a delicate balance. Ortiz knew, between strength and restraint, between justified defense and needless aggression. But finding that balance was now her mission, as much as protecting Earth had been. In the vastness of space, two civilizations had collided. What came next would depend on wisdom, as much as weaponry. And as she prepared to face Admiral Kethral across the communications channel, Lena Ortiz was determined to demonstrate that humanity possessed both in abundance.